Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the third webinar session of ISSE 2021. Today we're going to continue the discussions that happened yesterday and that where we were discussing digital wallets, the future, how it was from the legislative point of view, from the practical point of view in the afternoon. Today, in this session, we're talking about the GLASS Horizon 2020 project, which is a project funded by the European Commission, where we're looking particularly at digital wallets and developing a digital wallet in the context of EU efforts, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the details of the project, very high level, and then Bill will drop into some very interesting technical aspects, which I think is important, which underpin the discussions that we've had up to now. And then Leyla will be talking about how we can all get together and join together in a collaborative effort to provide the right input and understanding of this from a stakeholder point of view. So it's going to be, this is really an implementation, real world implementation, and we're going to go from that. Please note that if you want questions, and we welcome questions, please use the Q&A tab. Chat is open, but for discussion. And we've also got the Twitter feeds that you're very welcome to use. That's at EMA1 and using #web3 for the hashtag. Recordings and presentations will be available in due course. So if I could have the next slide, please. GLASS, again, we have GLASS is very much focused towards end users, in the sense that we recognize, and we talked about this yesterday, where uptake is essential. So all of our communications and messaging is around that. That's why our tag is GLASS, control your own story. And that's what we want to try and tell to the citizens and to people and to potentially end users, that this gives them control of all their attributes, etc. Next slide, please. Digital wallets in the future is the title of all of these sessions. And next slide, please. Right. Myself, I'm John Sharma. I'm chair of EMA. And also EMA is a partner of dissemination and communications for GLASS. We have Bill Buchanan, who is professor at the School of Computing at Edinburgh Napier University in the UK. And he'll be talking about towards a decentralized web and e-governance of the future, which is exactly where we were going from yesterday. And Leyla Arsan, who's CEO of Tagus in Turkey, they're a GLASS partner as well. Sorry, as is Bill, of course. Leyla Arsan is a GLASS partner for e-government paradigm specifications and architecture analysis. So again, she'll be talking a lot about stakeholder involvement and how to move forward on that. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. So next slide again, please. So GLASS is all around letting you control your own story, as I said, and it's user control, user centricity. User centricity, if you're talking to the average citizen, does not ring as closely as controlling your own story. Must always remember that when we are communicating e-wallets, etc., at whatever level to the public, that we speak in their language. It's very important. But for this moment in time, what we're doing is we're talking a little bit more specialized. So it's a bit of a hybrid. So GLASS per se is a project which provides a distributed framework for sharing common services for public administrations across the EU, for citizens, businesses, and governments. It's not restricted for government to citizen. It's not restricted business to government. It's a mixture of it can be a mixture of everything depending on the wallets, how they're designed, and we could create a new paradigm for sharing and transforming and transferring personal information, always at the time citizen in control, of course. We have new and novel governance services, facilitating the free movement of business to a free movement to citizens, businesses, and providing an advanced e-government solution, maybe the next generation past where we are at the moment. And it will be in line with, as EIDAS 2 develops, we will be developing in parallel. So with luck, we will align very strongly. Next slide, please. Members of the GLASS Consortium include Unisystems, EMA, Fraunhofer, Istanbul Metropolitan Municipality, Hellenic Republic Ministry of Digital Commerce, and others such as Edinburgh Napier, of course, Tagus, Ubitek, and University of Patras. So we will be operating as a funded project until December 2023, and then after that we will continue depending on how EIDAS 2 is coming out. So our sustainability long term is assured, but we haven't finalized those designs yet. Next slide. Thank you. So what the plan is to build e-wallets that will address some of the common issues that we are looking at for e-wallets, and what we discussed yesterday about interoperability and cross-working and all the rest. So the first demonstrator is around, or series of demonstrators will be around moving abroad. So it's one of the most difficult things, I think, that you can possibly do, and it's not got much easier. If you want to move between member states, in particular, there are issues that need to be resolved. Luckily, a lot of the back office systems are in a situation where GLASS and e-wallets can take advantage of that. Few thanks to EIDAS that has laid very strong foundations now, and GLASS will be the next generation of that efforts and those initiatives. There's difficulties like understanding the processes between member states, because each member state has got different processes. There's language difficulties. There's a lot of the manual operations take a long time to do, and it's generally difficult. This is Alice, and these are some of the things that she'll be looking at and need to address if she wants to move. She needs to set up bank accounts, move bank accounts, use a passport, look at health and all these sort of things, and it's quite complex. It's easier if Alice could move around a lot, therefore she may need to do this more than once, and she can control who sees what and when. So moving abroad is the first class of pilots, of demonstrators. Next slide, please. Short-term visits abroad, not when you're moving residency, but when you're looking to stay for a shorter time abroad, there are still things that you need to do, sometimes more difficult if you're not making permanent changes, but you're just making interim changes. And GLASS can ease that process, as there is a lot, I think there's a lot of the movements, short-term movements, are from people moving, elderly people moving from one country to another, younger people moving away. So there's, it's an interesting area as well. And another one that we think that e-wallets can make a difference to making it easier. Next presentation, next slide, please. So getting a job abroad is perhaps the driver for a lot of movements. People wish to move abroad, but it is very difficult to move information in a trusted way. And a lot of that information may be private to the individual, may be sensitive. So it's important that the information that he needs can be transferred as appropriate and in his control all the time. It's we'll use different types of examples of this, but this is going to be one of this is a common pilot and demonstrator among interoperability, because this does demonstrate all of these things, and there is a large movement of people from one country to another. So what I'll do is I'll move from here on to Bill, who will start. We'll talk about the more technical details of GLASS and towards a decentralized web and governance which is needed around this. So Bill, can I leave it to you?
Yeah, thank you, John. So my name is Bill Buchanan, and I'm presenting on behalf of a very large team at the university, and also as part of a much larger consortium that John outlined. And really the standpoint is that we need change. We have an old legacy web, and we need to move towards a new type of web. So the team here, we've got specialisms around blockchain and cryptography, but we've focused on the citizen for over a decade, and to look at how you can build systems that are focused very much around the citizen rather than around organizations. As part of this, we've created several highly successful spin-out companies, including Symphonic Software, which really had a focus initially around how citizens can share healthcare information. So really we need to move away from this horrible centralized web that we've created. We have HTTP, we have URLs and URIs and so on. We have domain names, we have little squiggles in our URIs and our URLs, question marks and pass parameters and so on. So why can't we move towards a web which is much less centralized? Facebook took themselves off the internet for nearly half a day. If a company like Facebook can actually remove themselves completely from the internet, we really must worry about the brittleness and the resilience of the web that we've actually created. And really we want a web which is resilient and free from censorship. So there has been cases of countries controlling the access to content in their domains. And really we need to break down these barriers towards the access to our infrastructure and to information. So we need a much more distributed approach to this. And we also need to integrate encryption and really policies for access control, and for citizens to have control of those policies, not for them to be written by Facebook or Google or Netflix and so on. So we need to start to define the rights that citizens have to their own data and the rights that they share. And encryption is one of the poorest implementations of any type of security that we would have. The lack of understanding of encryption and the scope of it really is quite worrying in this modern world. In fact, the internet was built without security in mind. A lot of the initial protocols were created without even thinking about security. And then we've got stick and plasters, which have made these things work in a bit more of a secure way. From HTTP to HTTPS isn't a vast leap in cybersecurity. We need fastness and efficiency. So the days of delays to access to information really are gone. We typically have high-speed connections and we want access to our content as quickly as possible. And why can't we integrate version control into our infrastructure for information so that we can actually make sure that we understand how our content is changed, and to backtrack, to fork, to understand when something is correct and what the different versions of it and who worked at it at various times. When we look at things like IP, intellectual property, we have an old-fashioned patent system which is still based on paper-based methods. Why can't we have methods that allow the creation of knowledge and for it to be well documented as to who contributed to what? So really what we're doing is moving into an information age. Our industrial age is past. We built systems in the 1960s and the 1970s around organizations, and we were very lucky to be little planets revolving around the key stakeholders. In healthcare, we were not seen as the core element of the healthcare system. The doctors and the nurses and the administrators were really the infrastructure that was created. But we need to move towards a system which is much more distributed, holistic, patient-focused, citizen-focused, preemptive, rather than waiting for something to happen. We actually can be preemptive. And we need much more control of healthcare, of our government services, of our lives, and our families need to be part of that ecosystem. And as part of this, we need to start to build systems around the citizen. And why can't we move away from our paper-based contracts, our legal system, where we sign with wet signatures? What a crazy idea wet signatures are in these days, that I have a piece of paper and a pen and I do a squiggle, and that seemed to be legally binding. And then because of the pandemic, we then said, well, you now have to take a GIF picture of your signature and paste it into your Word document and then make a PDF, and that becomes a legally binding entity for these contracts. It's an old-fashioned idea in the way that we've really built our internet in terms of forms, of folders, of filing cabinets, and so on. So we can move to a world which actually starts to be checking things correctly and has some digital security built into it. So we need to move away from our paper-based approach to our legal approaches towards smart contracts. We can enact the processing for us, and also we can audit all of the transactions, especially to move the auditing much more towards the citizen. But we can't just throw everything onto these ledgers and for the information to be stored, because we can never delete them. So we've been looking at off-chain and on-chain. Off-chain is the things that need to happen away from our smart contracts, and on-chain are the things that we need to make sure that are digitally correct and have a mathematical basis. Let's build a foundation which is a concrete foundation rather than the foundation of sand that we've built on the internet. And how do we build the right to be forgotten? We don't trust Google really, or many companies, to make sure that they've deleted all of our data. Why can't we have smart contracts which integrate the rights to be forgotten and follows up and make sure that that is the case? Our citizens privacy must be the most precious thing that we protect. So we need to move away from wet signatures towards digital signatures. And digital signatures will give us real proof that a certain entity did a certain thing. And it's really the way that we can prove our identity. And we have different personas, we have different ways of doing things, and we have different ways to log in. We might have a family persona, and we might have a business persona. Each of these personas are important to us, and it's through digital signing that we can actually make sure that we can prove our signing of something. And we also need an infrastructure where we can revoke our public keys, because in the future, it is our public keys which will digitally show that we are the entity and it was us that enacted something. But sometimes these public keys are our private keys get stolen or we lose them. So there must be some way in our infrastructure to make sure that these public keys, when they are lost or hacked, can be revoked in some way. And at the core of this is citizen identity. We need ways to have single sign-on to things, and we need different ways to make sure that our lives become simpler. We have mobile phones now, and our whole life, our whole integration, our whole identity is integrated to that simple device. And with that device, we can allow new opportunities to happen to make sure that the citizen integration is seamless. Like it or not, most citizens have now adopted this approach where the mobile phone becomes their core part of accessing our digital world. And why can't they be citizen-owned? And why do we have to be forced to have identities through large faceless organizations? Surely we can actually have our own sovereign identity in which we can control what's allowed to be shared at any given time. And why do we have to do the same thing again and again and again? I have to prove my passport, my driver's license again and again to different stakeholders. Why can't I request it once? I can then have a time to use that, and then I can use it many times, but it's under my control. So let's go for a little bit of context of the problem statement and the real difficulty that we have. And in academia, we love working on hard problems and problems that have no known solution at the current time. But through this, we can actually look at solving this problem. And the problem we're trying to solve is we have nearly 500 million citizens in the EU, 27 countries and 24 different languages, many different legal systems and ways of doing things, many different approaches and so on. So the problem statement really is that we now have to try and integrate every single citizen and not lose one. You need to integrate all these countries and not lose one. And we need to make sure that it's supported from all different aspects. So GLASS really is looking to create an ecosystem for the future, and it's one which looks towards the future and not towards the past. We've integrated wallets, we've looked at new systems such as the Interplanetary File System, or IPFS, and we've looked at how we can actually integrate all of these systems together to show how we can create a modern e-governance model. The use cases, I'll quickly go over these as was done by John, but really these are focused on three core use cases. The first one is Alice finds a job. And when you distill it down, it's not a difficult process really. We need a validation identity document, a birth certificate, a national certification document. All of these can be done digitally, and where we can actually find the digital proof that can then be stored somewhere as in a wallet. We're all comfortable with the concept of a wallet. In a cryptocurrency wallet, your wallet just has your private key. But in a wallet that Glass would see, we actually contain all of our driving licenses and so on. And then we can reveal the elements that we have in our wallet to whoever wants to see them. And once we've done it once, we can then use that for other use cases. So when it comes down to it, the basic detail of the wallet, as we can see, is that Alice in this case can share the elements, but then we can integrate this with smart contracts. And with smart contracts, we can make sure that we have an auditing trail, that we keep the data contained. So if we have private information and we have encryption keys, the smart contract can actually protect that data. So we're using the interplanetary file system as one method to do this. And at the core of the interplanetary file system is a concept called a CID, or a content identifier. It's actually pretty simple. And it's simple because all I need to do is to create a hash of my document. And a hash signature in cryptography is a unique value that can't really exist in any other place. So if I create a unique document, I give you my CID, and you will be able to identify that document and find it from the CID. How simple is that? I can then give you my CID for the document, and you can access it straight away. And the thing with no complex DNSs and lookups and no URLs with squiggly lines and question marks and so on that seem to go on forever, I give you some numbers and you can find it. But what we can then do is that we can distribute that document or the data that relates to that CID across the world, so that no firewall in the world will be able to block it. In fact, why don't we put that document and the data close to where it's required? And in that way, you can get it quickly. So the IPFS file system, IPFS infrastructure allows for data to be distributed almost like a Tor type, a BitTorrent type network, where we can actually store fragments of data across the world, and then we can have fast access to them. IPFS doesn't integrate security and encryption at its core, but is there as a foundation layer towards a decentralized web, a web where we can actually make sure that we will always get access to content and we can verse control it. So our basic solution, if we look at it, is like this. Looks a little bit complex, but basically I want to prove my academic award. I can get my university to sign it with their private key and then issue it. And then my university will then expose its public key, and anyone who trusts that public key can validate my credentials. So we've been looking at this, and we've made sure that every single document that's stored anywhere, no matter if it's in a permissioned area in Hyperledger or in an open area such as an IPFS, is always encrypted. It is the encryption key and where it's stored and the rights of access to that encryption key, which then becomes the fundamental element. But at the core of this is the wallet. The wallet contains the keys that are required to release the information, and also the access control that the citizen requires from these. So this is our infrastructure and its smart contracts, which will then define the actual access to anything. But as this core, we're moving towards what's called a permissioned approach to this. And a permissioned approach allows for much more trust and security within inside ecosystems. And the world may be made up of these communities all interlinking together. And we see these communities very much as a Hyperledger fabric type approach to this. And the wallet for us integrates directly with this Hyperledger fabric infrastructure. So when we look at it in the case that we have basically credentials that are signed by entities, and then those credentials are passed through the Hyperledger infrastructure using the wallet as the key element of defining the trust of the sharing of it. So the wallet, it's been implemented by PDM as one of our partners on it, and it has a much larger scope than a cryptocurrency wallet, which basically has your private key in it to sign cryptocurrency. The wallet is much more of storing all of the information that we would require: single sign-on, the key generation, the encryption keys, the isolation of the distributed apps, and so on, all integrate into our concept of a wallet. And in this case, we can have a wallet which will define the data sharing, key management, and the whole distributed application ecosystem without relying on existing ecosystems that are provided by existing companies. So the wallet that's been chosen is OpenDSU and has been created so that there is off-chain information, and then that also links with on-chain, such as through IPF and Hyperledger Fabric. Encryption is at the core of everything that we're doing to make sure that no document is unprotected, no matter where it is. So the advantage with the wallet that we've chosen is there is integrated encryption into this. And it allows us to link to any blockchain method that we want, either into permissionless in Ethereum or into Hyperledger Fabric. And the world is likely to be a future which is these interconnected infrastructures. And we have methods such as Polkadots to be able to make sure that we can chain all of these infrastructures together to build a trust relationship between domains. Domains can be small or it could be large, as in countries. And then we have an ecosystem which creates our normal ecosystem for our distributed applications. But we have an area that we can control, which will allow the sharing of key information across e-governance apps. In this way, we create a world where the citizen can move very quickly towards the trusted area of their e-governance. So overall, for our focus, really, we're looking at a single sign-on wallet to allow access to multiple services. Gather once, use many approaches. We have an access control policy, which will allow the citizen to share with whoever they want, and then for that to be audited, because auditing is just as important as the sharing process, because you want to know who's had access to your information. And we have a two-way interchange between the central authorities and the citizen, and then will be controlled through a web-based interface. So thank you so much. I'll hand you on to the next presenter. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If I can pass over to Leyla Arsan now from Tajas, the partner, glass partner, and Leyla. Right. I don't think we can see your screen. Yes.
Yes, can you see now? Thank you.
Can you put a full screen onto yours, please?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, John. Thank you, Bill, for the presentations. Yes, my presentation is about the stakeholder involvement, which we believe in order to achieve the objectives of GLASS, that we are having ambitious, in fact, mottos, like saying GLASS puts the individual at the heart of controlling their own relationship with government and business. And on the other side, we are saying that developing the next generation of digital identity in line with new regulations and utilizing self-sovereign identity, which are really future governance models. And these, in order to achieve these mottos, these objectives, it is really important to include all in the processes during the research and innovation processes, and to create the community, to create the ecosystem, to be able to activate the ecosystem. GLAS is also contributing into European Union policies, e-government action plan 2016 to 2020, and I believe that there is a new plans coming, and we will be one of the writers of this action plan with this GLAS project. And what we contribute mostly is on cross-border mobility, in which we will deliver public services across borders and engage digital interactions to get involved in designing and delivering new services. So we also contributed finally in digital single market and e-IDS. And going to talk about the GLAS ecosystem. The GLAS has a GLAS wallet on the heart. And this GLAS wallet will be used by citizens and will include the evidences and documents and all in it, in which it will be operated with the GLAS decentralized infrastructure, which we have three principles, like once-only principle, digital by default, security, traceability, integrity, and privacy. And on the ecosystem, there are not only citizens, but there are public services which will develop and offer digital integrated public services by simplifying the admin processes and cross-border e-governance policies. And the public sectors means also having professionals, policymakers, and IT experts in it. And on the other side, there is a private sector which will develop and offer all services, securing and ease access to public services, optimization of processes in which there are professionals and IT experts, and also the dev developers. So, so the ecosystem is mainly including these professionals, policymakers, experts, and citizens and all. But it's not only this. This is the main concept. But in the ecosystem, we have different stakeholder groups. The main groups are government, citizen, and business, but we have standardization bodies, policymakers, NGOs. We have and vulnerable groups, data consumers and data providers at the same time. We have living labs. This is very important, having this kind of communities, living labs and vulnerable groups, especially on the usefulness of the digital wallet. And we have researchers, and we have the business side also. We have tech providers, and there are also some business entities and hubs on providing business aspects and the commercialization solutions and parts. In order to create the GLAS value, we believe that the stakeholders' benefits are at most importance. So the government benefits and citizen benefits and the private business benefit is very important. If we can understand their own motivation, if we can understand what are the benefits of these stakeholders group, we can better create our value proposition. That's why we are focusing on these stakeholders' benefits and their needs. And this will be done by creating first a GLAS governance model. We will have a GLAS governance model. We are working on that, but we are not going in the GLAS project. We are not developing the governance model ourselves. we will be working together with our stakeholders, because this project is, as I told you at the beginning, is very much related with citizens, public, and business. We cannot exclude these groups while we are creating our governance model. That's why we are going to work with our stakeholders together, and in order to understand their needs. And we will do several workshops. We will have some SWOT and benefit analysis to get their benefits, and finally to understand the value and to be able to create the value proposition of GLAS. And finally, to develop a business model and sustainability plan according to stakeholders' views. That's why the stakeholders' participation is very much important. And we will have several activities. We will organize some workshops, some surveys, in order to identify their needs and benefits, indicate the innovation potentials, especially on the business part and especially on the citizen part and public, bringing them together, and provide a measurable estimation of the value to be delivered. So all these findings will be used to compile a business case, a specific case for GLAS, and collaboratively with our stakeholders. And finally, we will be able to denote the exact benefits of stakeholders and identifying ways for turning this business process into innovation value, and identifying the major cost centers and revenue generation nodes. So at the end, as Jean said at the very beginning, this is a real world implementation. It's a research project, but a research project focused and having activities to be able to be implemented in the real world. That's why the stakeholders' activities are very, very much important for us. And at this stage, the GLAS has some impact. And this impact is the digital governance pathways among the stakeholders across borders, reinforcing trust in public institutions by the open government approach. So this means the citizen satisfaction, and establishing of a culture of cooperation and co-delivery, transparency, accountability, and trustworthiness, enhance cooperation on digital accessibility between various stakeholders, contribute to the improvement of people's quality life, bringing more trust, easy to use and secure services on user sides, and improve citizens' trust in public sector within the personal walls. This is our main impact. But in order to have this impact, we cannot do this alone. We cannot behave as only one project consortium, but there are similar projects working on these to have these impacts, to create this impact. And similar research and innovation projects, especially of the same governance and digitalization groups and communities. So that's why we have in mind, and we are launching, is a new cluster for these EU projects to create a synergy in between. So it's called the Governance for the Future. This is the name of the cluster that we are initiating right now with this conference, with this webinar here. We are launching our initiation on governance for the future. These are not only the projects that we will be members, but this is the initiation, and we are expecting to have other projects and all other stakeholders to be active in this cluster. For example, there is Across, there is Data Walls, working with cross-border services and data sovereignty. There is data vaults empowering with secure and privacy-preserving data, interlink on innovating for digital single market. There's digital for Europe for all, and open trusted computing platform Rainbow, M-Government for EU, services for Europe, cross-border semantic interoperability of powers and mandates, and also in GLASS, individuals controlling their own relationship with government and business. So all these projects have similar and common objectives. And if we can bring all these projects together and collaborate in order to be able to achieve all projects, their objectives, and impact on these common targets, and it's very important. That's why we are launching this this cluster, EU cluster. And what we are going to do with this EU cluster, we will have an impact on creating an ecosystem for future governance approach, innovations like digital wallets, self-sovereign identities, e-governance models, and so on, creating synergy among digital governance research and innovation projects, new digital governance pathways to create among the stakeholders. So we will have more stakeholders to be involved in these activities within these projects, and widespread recognition of the needs for benefits of the digital single market, and wide implementation of Web Accessibility Directive, and contribution to European policies and other strategic initiatives, and public-private sector collaboration, which is very much important and impacting on enhancing the innovation capacity and competitiveness growth in order for Europe to maintain its global economic competitiveness at the end. And this is very much interesting because I have checked the crosslinks between Europe clusters, Horizon Europe clusters and intervention area groupings and all stakeholder contributions. I took this from a research paper. And this is very much interesting that this is the circle of all circular graphics of all European Horizon Europe projects, clusters in these projects. And we are contributing into digitalization mostly with governance for the future cluster once we started, and industry manufacturing, social economic transformation, and security and democracy as well. And so we will have a very important and very wide but focused impact with this cluster, we believe. So let's shape the governance of the future together. And we would like to have all stakeholders to join our GLASS ecosystem and be part of the governance for the future EU cluster. And we will be sending the participation information and on the GLASS ecosystem and on the cluster in the coming days and after the conference to the registered participants of this webinar. So we will be very happy, and I hope we will have many stakeholders to join and to contribute and to be active in the GLASS ecosystem to create our governance of the future together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Leyla. It's important. When you're, just as you were talking now, I felt something very much that there's been a lot of conversations going on in the chat on this, and a few questions, but a lot of conversations. And yesterday, all day, there were a lot of discussions about various aspects of user centricity and usability, etc., etc. What's interesting is that there's a lot of voices, but there's no forum or ecosystem where they can sit and talk together from lots of different interests. I don't believe that there is one like what you're proposing, and within the GLASS project as well. And I think that this is a great opportunity for those that are here at ISSE and others as well, to join together so that we can answer some of the questions that only the users and only the stakeholders can answer. We can't know the thoughts of every stakeholder and the drivers and some of the important agendas that need to be satisfied for wallets to be a success. What we need to do is to get those voices together, to map them, to discuss so that we do have some coherent view. And I think this has always been a problem with projects and initiatives, is that there are lots of different voices, especially in identity. There is lots and lots of different voices, each with their different opinions, which are great. But there isn't any consistent ecosystem or consistent place where we can talk together and come up with some sort of consensus or range of, I don't know what the plural of consensus is, or if you can have one, but
consensus.
Yes. So I think it's really important, and this is a great initiative. We've got a number of questions and we can discuss these through, and loads of them, in fact, which is good. And I'm just looking through them now. There's some technical ones and others which are talking. So let's go through some of the technical ones. We'll do we'll alternate, I think, between them. We've got from Greg Jansson, and I guess this is really to Bill. What mechanisms do you aim to apply in order to integrate human trust into GLASS? Bill.
Yeah, it is such an important area. So we can have the best digital trust in the world, and we can have the best cryptography. But if you don't get the citizen on side, then you're always going to be struggling with the adoption. So Estonia and Finland have done a very good job in getting the citizens on side with their e-governance and with their healthcare system, especially making sure that there's an audit trail for citizens to know who's had access to their data. So through the Hyperledger Fabric approach, we have ways to be able to integrate that access trail to make sure the citizen actually knows who's accessing it. And we want to be able to integrate much better policies, such as integrating time. So a good policy that you might implement for access is to say that your driving license is only available for 1 hour to be accessed. And then after that, someone has to ask for an update for that. So we think the integration of access control policies that are focused on the citizen will get them on our side, and also the integration of these audit trails that are required. So that's part of the human trust that we see integrating, and that links very much into the digital trust that we've integrated.
Yeah, thank you. That's interesting. It came to me the other day. Somebody asked for a photocopy of my passport. And I thought, well, I'm giving it to them for the length of that passport. They have access to all of those details. And I've got no control as to what access they give to other people. Okay, I'm talking about actually rather than perhaps legally. They've got restrictions. There's another technical follow-on question to that is, you've taken Hyperledger. Is there any reason that you use that for integration into GLASS rather than a permissionless ledger approach?
Question. So as we hopefully will know, a permissionless approach is something like Bitcoin and Ethereum. The problem with those approaches is they're very much public. The smart contracts run in a public way, and anyone can join that ecosystem. Most of our trust infrastructures that we have are based on communities of health, communities of governance, and so on. But we need to share trusted identities across these communities. Hyperledger gives us a perfect opportunity to make sure that every entity is a trusted part of the ecosystem within Hyperledger Fabric. And then we can use to build these chains of trust across the different Hyperledger infrastructures to make sure that we can share information. And when you think about it, we're really building a digital world which maps on our existing human societal world in a digital way. And certainly the permissionless approaches doesn't really fit into that type of community type of approach. So the Hyperledger Fabric approach gives us the basis of the cryptography underneath to make sure that we have a toolkit that we can integrate digital signatures, encryption, privacy, and so on without relying on the old legacy protocols of the past. But on top of that, we have a software engineering layer which can actually build the ecosystem that we actually require. Without the software engineering layer, we're not going to go anywhere in terms of adding on layers of trust and governance and identity and so on. So we think with Hyperledger Fabric, we have the toolkit to be able to build systems which can scale into the future.
Yeah, what do you think, Leyla? Because I heard a lot of governance all the time, and we know that blockchain needs the correct governance to operate, and this is something that we want to ensure that we've got it right. What's your take on this? Leyla, with regard,
you're asking to me?
Yes,
sorry.
Sorry, what's your take on Bill, the use of governance all the time as a fundamental, and the building it up to make it useful? Because we've said all along that it's got to be absolutely useful is glass, and the wallet has to be make it easy and everything else for the citizen for it to be used. But there's this governance layer which provides that human trust and is essential for the blockchain as well. How do you see that developing in glass through the stakeholders, or?
Yes, I understood now very well. In fact, this is a challenge. It's a very challenging process because we are trying to put together in one innovation three different groups with three different benefits. One is thinking about chicken, the other one is thinking about meal, and the other one is thinking about the eggs. So it's really difficult to motivate them and to try to get what they really need. And it's also challenging to sustain this in both parts. But that's why we are, the governance model of glass is very much important at this stage, because we will be working on the business model. So the business aspect is very much important. While we are trying to understand the citizens, in fact, the initial study on this was made with use cases and clarified very well. And after this user requirements, we will be working together with the governments on the pilots and how they are operating, how they are implementing this system, and what are the consequences. These are very important as well for us to create the right governance model and the business part. If we cannot create the real business models, not real, let's say more realistic and effective business model, we will not able, nobody will be able to sustain. Governments cannot sustain, because government should collaborate, and not only cooperate together with business and on achieving this model. And awareness, to create awareness on citizen is very much important. And public is difficult, to make innovations and change in public. And I believe blockchain is, decentralized systems is very much appropriate in order to put this into action easily and faster ways. And blockchain, that we see that governments are having their blockchain infrastructures also ease these processes to what I believe. Can't hear you, John.
I think from one hand, the governments have a role to play in as providers, data providers and all the rest. But I do believe that, like Mark King, who one of the questions here about sketching who's going to pay for running this, which is a question that I think I've heard a million times on every new initiative that comes up in identity for the past 20 years, but who's going to pay for this great idea? And the governance has to be in place that it can show that we can get the right business models, and the right business models have to be good and real and not fantasies for the stakeholders. The stakeholders will know what's of value to them, what their agenda is, and how much value there is to what we're doing. If we don't have that information, we can say, well, X will pay for it, or Y will pay for it, or be paid downstream or upstream or whatever. But unless we know exactly, not exactly, but we have a good idea of what stakeholders will pay, what value it is to them, and I think then we won't know. It's unlikely that citizens will ever pay for it. It's unlikely that governments will want to pay for it. So there has to be the value of the wallet itself and the use of the wallet to stakeholders to find the best way and to find it of interest to them and the value that they will actually want to contribute towards the running of it. Now, I'm not familiar with how it works in Belgium, for example, and we did have him yesterday here talking, and he's actually on the chat at the moment. But it is important, and that's what the stakeholder consultation and what we're doing in the clustering is so important. That's why it's so important, is to try and tell exactly, it's to try and put down exactly how this is going to work. And it's important that we do that from a financial point of view and that business point of view. And that's why Leyla's putting so much effort, and we're putting so much effort into this stakeholder, the consultation and the clustering of the various projects that can all put different views in, and then stakeholders that will come in and to discuss with them what the business model could be to work with.
And one more thing I want to add is that the overall, I mean, we should have a wallet ecosystem, and we should be able to create more educated people there. So the training is very much important. The trainings and also to be included here is very much important, I think.
Thank you. There's a
because
question.
There are barriers like language, like knowledge barriers, and that's why.
I'm going to ask each of you in turn this question, which again, this is from Tony Seymour. You ask, why should we trust Facebook, etc., but why should we trust you? And I'll let you, both of you, I'll start Bill first this time, with regards to why should they trust us over Facebook?
It's a good question. And I mean, what we're really doing is architecting. I think to answer the business model case, you're creating a framework for creating the tools of the future. It's very difficult to understand where the use cases will be, but hopefully SMEs will be the ones that will take advantage of these opportunities. And what I see, it is the smaller organizations and businesses that are really looking towards that. Nothing that we will develop will be closed. Everything we hope will be published, will be open sourced. There is no hidden IP under the hood, and really it's up to us to create a system which can scale across the different countries of the EU. So it's really up to the citizen where they want to put the data and what they trust. For social media, it's probably Twitter and Google and Facebook, and you can't move away from that. In terms of applying for a job and needing citizen identity and proofs, then probably that's much more of what the EU is really trying to guide towards. So all I can say is that we're building with the best tools that we can, and we're trying to architect rather than specifically lock down on key areas that might be used.
Thank you. Leyla?
In fact, they shouldn't trust us either. But that's why we give the control to them. Blockchain plus IPFS secures the trust. And also smart contracts over evidences. We also assure that GDPR is strictly followed by the evidence consumers. So,
I think that's a valid point. We shouldn't be trusted either. But if you look at why should we trust Facebook? Facebook's agenda, Facebook has an agenda, and large corporates that are running systems like Facebook have their own agenda. That is to make profit, and they will utilize it, people's data, in a way that they, even with permissions, because people see that sometimes as a trade-off between the functionality of Facebook and their privacy, I know. But from our point of view, we don't do anything like that at all. We have the citizen controls and manages their own data. They control where it goes, who doesn't see it, who does see it. And that's a very important difference, which means that there's no real direct comparison with people like Facebook. Again, I'm sorry to Facebook for using their name, but to a commercial, to a scheme which is something as a large corporate such as Facebook, where they make their money from data and the use of data, whereas glass and the wallet shouldn't do. It should be more transaction. I believe maybe more transactionally based. So you are doing something that has using your wallet that has advantage. I'm transferring information to a university, or I'm transferring information to an organization that needs that information to complete a transaction. That information that I give them through my wallet is going to be, could be verified, could be signed. It's got much more veracity than me handing a piece of paper over to them, and that has value in the long term. So I don't think you can compare Facebook type applications to what Glass is doing. It's very different. No matter what Facebook say, at the end of the day, their drivers are different, and that's important. Let's look at another question I've got. Sorry, I'm down. What are the biggest challenges to the government to implement the wallet? What can drive and sustain its usage? Again, a similar question, and there's a theme to come out a little bit. So, Bill, do you want to start again, or?
Yep, yeah. And the key challenge is obviously the transformation of the existing ways of doing things. So, for example, I applied for a driving license update, and it took me around 4 or 5 months to get my license back from the agency. And it's because I had to send something by post, and then that had to be destroyed and had to be recreated again as a physical artifact. The way that we work now is that even days or hours are too long in a delay for things. So I think government needs to start to underpin what it is they require, what evidence, and it's possibly not always digital information that's required. Sometimes you actually want to see the physical person at various times and so on. So if we can remodel a lot of our processes around trust, and especially at borders, we need to understand what it is that's required and to make sure that there's a seamless translation from one country to the next over the border, and for border control to have some understanding of how to check these details. I think the Green Passport was a good example of how the EU countries can work together to create a common standard and how you can create the tools to be able to check that. It's not a perfect implementation, but it's at least a way forward towards a digital by default approach to these things. And the only way they can work is to make sure that each country is adopting the standards and actively transforming their infrastructure towards that. Along with this, the ecosystem is that you typically have large companies who will drive the IT infrastructure development within these countries. And I think we need to start to break that apart so the SMEs have the opportunity to innovate and create solutions that really push things forward and don't live with the status quo. So a lot of this is creating an economy for the EU for the future, and to make sure that not only is it for citizen benefit, but it's for the benefit that we can create companies which will scale for to the future.
Leyla, or because I was, while we were talking, there was on the chat, there was talking about training a little bit earlier on. And I recently was traveling to Greece, and there was with the Green Passport, I was surprised. Number one, in my vaccination certificates were read and used in the restaurants, etc., and that was great. And that shows there was a form of interoperability. Maybe, I don't know about the trust, but there was enough to satisfy what was needed. But against that, when I arrived at the airport, I was asked to show a piece of paper. And even though I had a digital copy of it, they wanted the paper. And I think the training then is very important. There's an aspect of training, number one, for member states to accept digital evidences if they're available. But secondly, to make sure that whatever we do, that the end user does actually know that if he's got a problem, he can press a button, print, for example, and put it into a format that is usable. The very worst thing for something like a digital wallet is to have all your evidences on your digital wallet, and you go to use it somewhere or other, and if it's remotely even, they say, very nice, but can you please send it in on paper? And you suddenly have to replicate your digital wallet in a form, maybe even in notarized form, that for that one occasion that you need to use a bit of paper signed with a squiggly pen or otherwise. So we must make sure that there is a capability either of making sure that people will always accept wallets, and that may be down to the equivalent of the EIDAS regulation in the longer term, which says you've got to accept another member state's EIDAS compliant EID, or you make it the ability to fall back to some sort of paper documentation if desperately if necessary. I don't know how that will work, but You know, we've done that with EIDs, with the IDAS somehow. So we've done that. That was regulational, of course. Sorry. Views, comments after that little bit of diatribe.
I completely agree. I completely agree. Yeah, I mean, really, citizens trust paper, and if that's what's required, they know that their battery won't fail on a piece of paper. So I don't think we're ever going to do away with it. But what's on that piece of paper is a QR code, which has a digital signature in there. So although it might be an untrusted piece of paper, actually there's a digital signature underneath there. So I think we need to look at the ways that is required, and to make sure that there is ways that these documents can be shown. And I think we'll never get away from not trusting our digital world, especially when we have key stakeholders in there.
Sorry, carry on. We're just finished.
Yeah.
Is that a subtle thing that we've got to stop now? I think. But please finish, Bill. Just finish off what you were saying.
Yeah, well, I think there's lots of different ways, and I think the tools are there, and really we can build systems in any way that we require.
So, Leyla, last word. You're on mute, I think.
Yes. Please join to the glass ecosystem. I see that there are many different ideas and comments, and I take all of them as contributions, and we will be sending participation forms after the conference in these days. So please keep in touch and join to the ecosystem and continue to contribute, so we create the governance for future together, as we are doing right now on discussions. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Bill. Thank you very much, Leyla. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending this session. We have lots more answers, which we'll try and go a bit further and try and answer some of the questions that are left out. I strongly urge you to come and help us sort out some of these questions through the clustering and stakeholder groups, and you will get the information on how to do that. That would be great. Thank you. We want to, I think the goal of GLASS is to make wallets a success, and we want to try and do that in the best possible way, which means involving as many people as we can to ensure that we have a good, reasonable, sensible, and valuable outcome with wallets and use to contribute to the EU. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.